We're going to begin talking about the theater of the world. And this is kind of in opposed to the stuff that we talked about earlier, which a lot of it is Western European theater. When we talk about the Greeks and we talk about the Romans and up into Shakespeare. And it's important stuff, and it's stuff that has influenced theater in the modern day around the world, especially here in this country. But theater showed up everywhere. Almost every culture has a tradition that you can look at and see that this is theater. So we're going to take a look today, starting today, at some other theater traditions around the world. And we're going to start in India with what's called Sanskrit drama. Now, Sanskrit drama is very, very different than the stuff that we see in the Greeks. Now, we don't know exactly when it began. It began pretty early, but we do not know exactly when. We have a few plays that were written right around 100 AD, so we know at least that Sanskrit drama was happening by then. But the way that they're written and the way that they talk about it suggests that the art form had been around much, much longer. So again, we don't know how long it's been around, but probably at least 2,000 years and probably longer than that. Now, there are, as I said, some distinct differences between Sanskrit drama and Western drama. And one of them is when we talk, as you'll see, is when we talk about the purpose of theater. In Western drama, we can see some very distinct, either it's there to educate you and to teach you moral concepts, or it's there just to entertain you. Sanskrit drama had a different view, something that was a little bit between the two of them. But you can see its influence today, especially if you watch any Bollywood films. For those who don't know what Bollywood is, it's a film industry based out of what used to be called Bombay, India. And so since it was like Hollywood, except for in Bombay, they're referred to as Bollywood. And it's actually very, very popular films, not as popular here in this country. But if you ever have a chance to watch them, they're really cool. And you'll see that they have a very distinct way of telling a story, which is different than how we do it here, generally speaking. And you can see some of the influence in Sanskrit drama on it. Now, we're going to talk about a playwright in there eventually, but first we're going to talk about somebody else. This is Bharata Muni. And forgive me, I'm probably going to be mispronouncing a lot of these names. Bharata Muni, though, is a very important critic and philosopher. We don't have a lot of names of the playwrights in that area. We have a couple, as I said, we're going to mention one. But we do know the name of a very important critic and philosopher. Bharata Muni may not have been an actual person. He might have been someone kind of like Homer from Greece, who some scholars believe might not have actually been a real person at all. They just kind of said the person that created this thing, when naming him Homer, it might have been a number of people that got together. We don't know about Bharata Muni. He may have also been a real person. He may have been a mythological person, but he is supposedly partly divine. He has a heritage that, like, from the gods, which suggests that he may have been a construct of several people. But in any case, we have a book that he wrote, which is called Natyashastra. It's actually a really long epic poem. Now, when I say an epic poem, I'm usually thinking about it like a story like the Iliad and the Odyssey, but it's not a story. It's actually a long codification where they describe theater and how it all must be done. But it's done in the form of a long, like 6,000 stanzas of a poem. So it's really impressive piece of work. And it tells you everything about how theater had to be, how Sanskrit drama had to be set up, how to write theater, how you must watch the theater, what movements an actor can make. It's all very, very regulated. There's a certain number of ways that an actor can move their neck or flare their nostrils or move their eyes. It's like all set out in line. And along the way, one of the most important things Bharata Muni does is define what are called the rasas. Now, this we're going to see in a minute is how the purpose of theater in Sanskrit drama was actually different. They had what they called rasas, or emotional states, that the drama was meant to try to bring the audience into this emotional state. And Bharata Muni outlined 8 specific emotional states. They were erotic, comic, pathetic, furious, heroic, terrible, odious, and marvelous. Later on, another set of critics and philosophers added a 9th one, peace. So these 9 emotional states, the idea is that this is what you're trying to get your audience into feeling. So when you talk about Sanskrit drama, we don't talk about tragedies and comedies the way that we would in ancient Greece. Instead, they talk about what kind of play is it? It's a pathetic play. It is a comic play. It is a terrible play. It is an odious play. Talking about what is the rasa it was aiming towards. Now, how do you get somebody into those emotional states? Well, you create these ramas by use of the 8 bhavas. The bhavas are human emotions that your actors are meant to portray and try to get the audience to feel that as well and lead them from one emotion to the next until you can create the rasa that you want. The 8 bhavas were pleasure, mirth, sorrow, wrath, vigor, fear, disgust, and wonder. Okay, so I just want to take a second here and outline how you should be taking these notes. I'm not going to do this every time, but since this is near the beginning and this is something that I want to make sure you're all able to do, I want you to make sure that you can know how to do this. So you're going to write in on that blank Bharata Muni, who is the important critic and philosopher, and the name of the book that he wrote, the Natyashastra. And then right here, we're going to talk about the emotional states, which are called rasas. And so that's a word that I want you to know. And then down here, you're going to outline the rasas: erotic, comic, pathetic, and so on. I'm not going to write them all down here. And then over here, you also have the defined human emotions, which were called the bhavas. So that's a term that I want you to know. So know what a rasa is, know what a bhava is, and the bhavas rather are pleasure and mirth and sorrow and so forth and so on, and write all of those in. And I want you to notice, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to point this out, notice that most of the rasas, there is a bhava that's directly connected to it. So if you have an erotic play, it's meant to try to bring you into a state of eroticism. And what is the emotion you're aiming for? Is pleasure, sexual pleasure. If you have a comic play, you're trying to create the emotion of mirth, and so forth and so on. So they're not exactly the same, but they are connected with one another. So I wanted to make sure you understood that concept. In any case, as I said before, the purpose of theater for them was to create one of the 9 rasas. And why would you do that? Why would you be trying to create this emotional state in a person? And a Westerner would say, okay, are you doing this just for the fun of it, so it's entertainment, or are you doing it for an educational purpose to try to teach them about something like this? And yeah, like I said, it's not really either one of those. Almost all Sanskrit drama ended happily. You didn't have tragedies with sad stories at the end to try to teach you an important lesson. There might be sad things that happen, but almost always by the end, it's a happy ending because they wanted their audience to leave with a sense of completion. And that was the purpose. It's kind of hard to fully wrap our mind around this, but the basic purpose of theater for them was to help the audience to live in harmony with the universe. It was a very, very Hindu idea, really. The idea that the universe is out there and you have all these different emotional states and you want to try to live in harmony with one another, with the gods and with nature and with everything. And that was the purpose of the theater, was to help the audience to achieve that. So it did grow out of religious expression in a way. So you could, if you want to, call this another one of those to educate purposes, but you can see how it's kind of different. It's not trying to teach you like this is what you must do in order to please the gods or whatever. It was by doing this, you were doing what you needed to do to be able to try to live in harmony with the universe. It's a very beautiful thing. And it is a culture that is strange to me, and so I'm sure I'm not fully understanding it, but it's a beautiful concept. So the audience and the actors. First thing to know about the audience is that they were separated by the caste system. Much of early India was. If you're not familiar with the caste system, basically the idea is you are born into a certain level of society and that is where you had to be. It was very difficult to move from one caste to another. You had priests, warriors, merchants, peasants, and some others. So the audiences, when they came to the theater, they would be separated by their caste. But, and this is pretty significant, the theater was meant for all of them. Every caste was meant to be able to go to the theater, enjoy it, and become one with the universe. So this was meant for everybody. Another thing that's kind of different, and this, I mean, in terms of what we're used to in most cultures around the world, the acting was not limited to men. There were troops of men, but there were also troops of women and even troops of mixed gender. So the Sanskrit drama did not have this kind of locked into it a gender discrimination that you see in the Greeks and the Romans in the medieval times, and you're going to see many of the other cultures we talk about have this same kind of strict separation. However, acting was very strictly codified. A lot of it from the Natyashastra has these different views about how exactly every movement, even nostril flaring or moving of eyebrows, was considered to be significant, which makes me think it was probably very difficult to be an actor during this time period, because if you are up on stage and your nose starts itching, you can't scratch it because that would be considered significant. Everything you did was significant to your character. And so it's a very codified way of doing theater. The one writer I want you to know about from Sanskrit drama is named Kalidasa. Now, Kalidasa was also a poet. Wrote a lot of poems, wrote a lot of plays. We do not have most of his work anymore. He lived around the 4th or the 5th century AD. We're not exactly sure, but somewhere around there. And he wrote a number of plays. Most of his plays, most of his work, his plays and his poems, are based on the Hindu religious text of the Vedas, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Puranas. And forgive me, I'm probably pronouncing those wrong. But most of his plays are based on Hindu religious texts, which means the audience kind of knew what was supposed to happen, but they were watching it to see how he would be able to bring the bhavas in to be able to create the rasas that were necessary. And only 3 of his plays still survive to this day. They're all pretty good, though. And one of them that I want you to know about is called The Recognition of Shakuntala. This, again, was based on a legend from the Hindu religious texts, and it's been transcribed in a lot of different ways, but the play that he made is actually quite good. So this is the story, a very quick version of the story of the Recognition of Shakuntala. So Shakuntala is a woman that lives in a hermitage. She has no parents. She has these holy hermits that are taking care of her, and she's helping to take care of the hermitage. And along comes this guy, he's a king named Dusyanta. Dusyanta sees her and falls in love with her. And according to some versions, he then marries her and gives her a ring. Other versions say, no, they couldn't have gotten married because they're the wrong caste, but he does like fall in love with her and give her a child, like make her pregnant and stuff like this. Again, it's hard to say for certain. In any case, they're engaged, they're in love, and he gives her a child. But then he has to go away to do king stuff. And while Shakuntala is still there, at one point she's just kind of like daydreaming about him, about Dusyanta, and how much she loves him. And along comes this prophet guy, and because she's daydreaming and not paying attention, she doesn't give him the respect and the honor and the attention that he needs. And so he's upset at her about this, and he curses her. And he basically curses her, whoever you were thinking about, that person is not going to remember you and not going to know who you are, and unless you can give him a special token to prove it to him. And so this terrible curse and stuff like that, and she's doesn't know exactly what it means, but she goes over to where King Dusyanta is, and she has the ring that he gave her. I'm gonna go ahead and use my ring, and she's going to like use the ring to kind of show him, this is who I am, so that you'll remember me. Along the way in her journey, she drops the ring in the Ganges River, and so when she gets there, Dusyanta does not recognize her, and she is very sad and very humiliated, and also very pregnant at this point, and so she turns away in despair.
And then we follow Dushyanta for a little while. He's doing things, he's fighting people, he's doing all sorts of things, and he has a vague sense in the back of his head that he's forgetting something important, but he doesn't know what it was because it's been cursed out of his mind. And in the middle of this, a fisherman finds the ring in the belly of a fish. Kind of gets the ring out of there and says, this is obviously a royal ring. It has the royal seal on it. So he brings it to the king saying, I have found this ring in the belly of a fish and it's obviously yours. It has your seal. And so he gives it to the king. The minute the king sees it, he remembers Shakuntala. And then he's about to go and see her, and then a god comes down and picks him up and takes him on a big kind of whirlwind tour of a various different stuff having to do with their mythology. Eventually, though, he is able to return to where Shakuntala is. Shakuntala now has a little baby, a young toddler. He sees her again, and they end up together again, and they are happily ever after. And that's basically the story of the recognition of Shakuntala. Okay, now as a discussion question, what I want you to do, I want you to think in your head of the last movie or play that you saw. Like one that kind of stuck in your head and is important. And I want you to think as if this was a Sanskrit drama. What is the rasa that it's trying to create in you? What is the emotional state that you believe it was trying to create in you? So for example, if I was doing this, I might say Star Wars, and I believe it was a marvelous rasa, because it's trying to create this state of wonder like that. So think in your head about what that would be. Give me the name of the last movie that you saw, and what is the emotional state you believe that might have been trying to do.